Hello and welcome to my video about episode 6 of Planet Earth, which is Ice Worlds. So as you'd expect, that's about the polar regions, the Arctic and the Antarctic. So the first half of this episode is based in the Antarctic, and we touch upon how barren the Antarctic is. We talk about how there's very little life there, the continent itself is pretty uninhabitable for the most part. It's only really along the peninsula you get any life. They do a really good job of showing you how harsh this landscape really is. And then you see some of the native wildlife. You see a lot of penguins, you see Adelie penguins and chinstrap penguins. Chinstrap penguins also featured in Planet Earth 2, but then we go basically to the furthest south that is inhabitable in Antarctica, where we see snow petrels. They've got their own wee colony. We see them breeding. Snow petrels, an animal that most people probably don't know about, and we see them getting hunted by skuas. So this is a really good sequence. This is the most southerly hunt in the world, which is quite cool. You never think about stuff like that, but no, it was a really good sequence. It's nice seeing snow petrels again. The fact that they've talked about how barren and how uninhabitable and hostile Antarctica really is. It is cool to see animals inhabiting it. But then we get humpback whales. So the humpback whale sequence is a lot more in depth than I remember. I felt similarly to the humpback whale sequence in this episode as I did to the Nile crocodiles in the freshwater episode, where it was something I'd seen before. Humpback whales with their bubble net, and they blow the bubbles to lure the fish in, and they sing to them. And I remember that, but we got a lot more to it. We see the humpback whales luring them in. We see the actual in the water. There's a lot more stuff in the actual water than I remember. It's really a good sequence. And then we get emperor penguins. So the emperor penguins really are the stars of the Antarctic side of this episode. We see them coming in from the sea to their colonies. We see them kind of pairing up. It's all really good. You see the females going back to the sea, obviously, because they're starved basically. So the males have to look after the eggs. We already saw that in the first episode, the emperor penguins huddling together for the warmth. We see a lot more of that here. It's still quite good again. It's just as effective as it was in the first episode. I think because penguins are quite comical anyway, I think showing you how harsh their lives are is quite a good focus. I think it made penguins seem a bit more serious at the time. I think people probably saw penguins as a bit of a joke at the time, and I think it did do a good job of showing you how much these animals really do struggle in ways that we probably couldn't understand. And then we go to the Arctic. So it's a very different kind of story. The Arctic's an ocean, so we see there's a lot more life there. We see eider ducks pretty early on. They come into these cracks in the ice where they're still able to get into water. Then we go and see musk oxen. So we spend quite a lot of time with the musk ox. We see that they're basically these little herds. We see that because they're quite good at turning over the ice and getting into the vegetation, they do attract other herbivores, like there's ptarmigan, there's Arctic hares as well. We see they attract predators like Arctic foxes looking to get at their calves that was recently born. And then we see the wolves. So Arctic wolves and musk oxes are footage we've seen so many times before. In Planet Earth 3 we got a quite in-depth look at them, although I did think at the time it kind of been done before. This bit of footage isn't that extensive, but it's very effective, I think. We see the wolves basically testing the oxen, and then we see that this one calf has basically been separated from its mother, and it's out there, it's out there, it's unprotected. You're kind of like, all right, the mother's all coming, band round to protect that calf. But then we cut to the wolf just howling to, bring in the troops, and Attenborough basically says that this calf probably won't survive. And then that's it, we cut to the next bit of footage. I think that's very effective. Again, I think that's one of the things that makes Planet Earth so unique compared to modern series, is that most series would try and put a happy end and a happy spin on things. Not this series. We basically say, yep, this animal's probably going to die, and that's it. Not much we can do about it. The fact that we're left hanging so many times in this series, not just in this episode, but throughout the series as a whole, is very effective at showing you how really harsh life for an animal really is. I think that's really good. And then we see the stars of the Arctic side of things, which is the polar bears. We see the same bit of footage we saw in the first episode, with the polar bear mother emerging from her den and her two cubs going down. It's still fun, but we basically take a bit more of a serious look at it. And then we see polar bears just struggling to stay on the ice. The ice is melting. This is as close as the series has to an environmental message. Basically talking about how polar bears are struggling because the ice is melting and they can't get to the food. Polar bears really are the poster boys of the climate change movement. When you think of climate change, you think of polar bears. It's almost like a word association at this point. And it's a very effective way of showing you just how much they are struggling. The polar bear just trudging through what is basically partially melted ice. Then we kind of get to the Arctic summer, where we see a lot of animals are flourishing. We see a lot of seabirds, little auks, there's sandhill cranes, they're all there, they're all breeding, it's all looking good. And we see Arctic skuas as well. So the Arctic skua sequence is brief but quite funny. We see the Arctic skuas just, driving off anything that could be a potential threat to their nest, including caribou. It's just these caribou, just, quite big animals compared to the skuas, just absolutely looking terrified, running away as the skuas are just pecking at them. Like, it is quite funny. Although that being said, I imagine if I was in that position, I probably wouldn't want to hang around either. But it is just quite funny. To be less funny, we see a male polar bear just swimming. When I mean swimming, I mean like actually deep, deep water swimming. It's something that they talked about, and they said in the series that, this was one of the few times they'd ever filmed that before, and it was becoming more common. It's something that was kind of commonplace now. I feel like we all know polar bears travel, hundreds of miles in search of prey, and they are basically marine mammals, to be fair. But I think at the time it was probably a bit more shocking. We see this male polar bear, as much as he's able to swim, and it's a great sequence showing how efficient he is in the water. He can't swim there forever. He has to find food at some point, and he finds that in the form of walruses. So this is a great sequence. It's something that's stuck with me for years. It's very memorable. The polar bear's taking on the walruses is great. The polar bear's desperation is very evident. Like, you see it just going for calves initially. It's testing the herd. As the sequence goes on, it goes from just being, the polar bear testing the waters, trying to get some food, to this polar bear is just on its last legs and needs to get something. As soon as it's deterred from the first walrus, it then goes for another larger calf, a less easy target. It's not able to get it. At the end, it's just tackling adults, which there is no real hope it's going to get it. It does put up a good fight. Like, there's a lot of blood. One of the walruses is in clearly like bad shape, but it's still able to drag the polar bear into the deeper water. And the polar bear is attacked by the walruses, and it is pretty severely wounded. Amber does say that the polar bear is not going to survive. The fact that the last time we see the polar bear is just next to the walrus colony, which aren't bothering with it anymore. Like, they know it's not a threat, and it's just digging itself a little hole, almost like a metaphorical grave. Where it's just calling out. It's clearly in some amount of pain. It's pretty harrowing, but again, it's just very effective. It shows you how harsh life is. And then we see the penguins, as we did in the first episode, their chicks have emerged, the mothers come back. It's all nice. However, it's not so nice because we then see that there's penguins that didn't make it. Some chicks were orphaned, and their mothers just didn't come back. Their fathers have gone back to the sea because they're going to starve, and they're just wandering around looking for mothers. And sometimes there's too many mothers because some mothers' chicks didn't survive. They're just all fighting for these orphans, and a lot of them die in the process. It's quite horrific. But then when the storms come in, some of them get separated. There's a group of quite a few little chicks wandering around themselves, completely away from the colony. Again, any other series would try and paint a narrative of them getting back to their colony. It would all be nice. Not here. Again, all these chicks look pretty rough, like they're all frozen. A lot of their eyes are frozen. It's not very nice. And we say, yeah, the storm's going to claim its first victims. There's no finality there. Maybe they survived, maybe they didn't. But the point is, we don't know, and that's what this episode and this series does very effectively, is just, show you that, again, life's not very fun for all animals. And then again, we see the males come back, and it's nice at the end. I think there is it ends in a positive way. And then we see the polar bear cubs from the start. They're much larger now, they've left their mother, and they're still wandering together. And we just talk about how, these polar bears, they seem to be doing all right, but maybe in the future, who knows, maybe they're not quite prepared for the drastic changes that are coming their way to their environment. And we pan out, and the music is great. The music's great throughout the episode. It's very haunting. A lot of the time it's a very foreboding score. The diaries is split between the penguin colony and the polar bears. So the penguin colony stuff was great. The couple that were there, they were there for a year. Like, that's pretty crazy. And again, camera equipment's not working properly because it's so cold. We see this one chick's falling in a crack, and the woman, she manages to dig it out. And again, that's kind of this happened again in Dynasties, where the camera crew were filmed, say, helping the animals when they really shouldn't be involving themselves in their lives. But my argument would be that if it was any other situation, if they weren't cameramen, you'd want them to help them. And likewise, they're not filming them at that moment, so you're not interfering with the behaviour, you're interfering with the footage. So I think if you're in the position of letting something die when you could easily save it, you'd like to think you would take the opportunity to help it. So that's kind of that. But the stuff in the Arctic's great as well. You see Doug Allen again. He's out there with the other guy, and they're filming the polar bears. But they're getting basically not attacked, but certainly investigated by several male polar bears. Some of them coming pretty close. They're having to use minor explosives to get rid of them. It's not really doing the trick. It's quite funny as well when he's complaining about the sledge. He's swearing. That's really funny. And the polar bear just running towards him, and him running away, and the other guy saying, "Where are the batteries?" That's hilarious. I mean, that stuff's really good as well. Yeah, it really ends in a really effective way. The polar bear coming to their window and just sniffing around. It's quite definitely wouldn't want to be in that hot anyway. So yeah, this episode is great. I think it may be the best one so far in the series. Maybe certainly up there. Highlights, I mean, the penguins and the polar bears pretty much dominate it. The musk oxen were great as well, and the snow petrels as well, but it very much is the emperor penguins and the polar bears kind of episode, which is not a problem with me. So yeah, really good stuff. So what were your thoughts? What were your highlights? I imagine they were probably also the emperor penguins and the polar bears because they got the bulk of the screen time. But if you liked something else, and let me know. Maybe you liked the eiders. I don't know. I'll be doing the Great Plains episode next time, so look forward to that. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or not if you don't want to. And yeah, I'll see you then, and goodbye.